She had the kind of face people forgot the moment she left a room. Not because she wasn't striking, she was in a quiet, composed way, but because she never demanded to be remembered. Maya Reyes walked into Mercy General Hospital on a Tuesday morning carrying a canvas tote bag, a thermos of black coffee, and absolutely no intention of making a scene. She had tied her dark hair into a low bun, pinned her name badge to the left breast of her scrubs, and taken her post at the triage desk in the emergency department, with the same calm efficiency she had once used to set up a field surgical station in the Korangal Valley. Nobody here knew that, of course. Nobody here knew anything about her, and she preferred it that way. The ER at Mercy General was a brutal place. It served the worst neighborhoods in the city, a dense urban corridor where poverty and violence had been slow dancing for decades. Every shift brought overdoses. Stabbings, gunshot wounds, domestic violence cases, and the occasional trauma so severe it made seasoned nurses grip the edge of the nurses' station and breathe through their teeth. Maya had absorbed all of it without flinching. She had been there 3 weeks, and already the other nurses had noticed something off about her. Not wrong exactly, just different. She never panicked. She never hesitated. When a multi-vehicle trauma came through the doors at 2 in the morning, most of the junior nurses froze for half a second. Maya was already moving, already calculating, already running triage assessments in her head, with the kind of speed that came not from nursing school, but from something older and harder. Dr. Harrison Cole noticed too, but he drew the wrong conclusions. Cole was the kind of man who had been told he was brilliant so many times that he had started to believe competence in others was actually a form of insubordination. He was the head of the emergency department, tall, silver-haired, with the sort of bearing that came from 40 years of people parting hallways for him. He had trained at Johns Hopkins. He had published papers. He wore his authority like a second skin, and he did not like rookies who moved like they had nothing to prove because, in his experience, that kind of quietness usually meant arrogance hiding behind humility. He decided within days of Maya's arrival that she was a problem. It started small. He corrected her in front of patients, not because she was wrong, but because he could. He overrode her triage assessments twice, both times reassigning lower priority to patients she had flagged as urgent. Both times, the patients deteriorated exactly as she had predicted. He never acknowledged it. He assigned her the worst shifts, the administrative overflow, the supply room audits that nobody else wanted. He introduced her to visiting residents as one of our newer additions, still finding her footing. Maya accepted all of it with the same flat, steady expression she had used to accept orders in conditions far worse than a hospital corridor. She said nothing. She did her job. She waited. What Cole could not have known, what none of them could have known, was that Maya Reyes had spent 8 years as a United States Navy SEAL medic embedded with one of the most classified special operations units in the Pacific Theater. She had run combat medicine in active firefight zones. She had performed emergency surgeries under fire with equipment that would have made the Mercy General Supply Room look like a luxury suite. She had treated wounds that most ER doctors would only read about in textbooks, and she had done it in the dark, in the rain, with rounds coming in from 3 directions. She had held men together with her hands while helicopters screamed overhead. She had made life and death decisions in fractions of seconds under conditions that broke most people. And she had been so good at it, so terrifyingly precise, that her commanding officer had once told her she was the most valuable person on the team. And he had not meant it as a compliment to her bedside manner. But that was before the mission in the South China Sea that ended things, before the debrief that nobody outside of a classified SCF would ever know the details of, before Maya decided that she wanted to spend the rest of her life saving people in a different kind of trench. She had transitioned out quietly, earned her nursing credentials with the same focused intensity she applied to everything, and arrived at Mercy General looking for nothing more than honest work and a reason to keep going. On the morning of her 4th week, Dr. Cole made a decision that crossed a line even for him. A young woman came in presenting with symptoms Maya recognized immediately as a tension pneumothorax, a collapsed lung with pressure building in the chest, a condition that could kill within minutes if untreated. Maya flagged it as a priority one. Cole glanced at the chart, glanced at Maya, and told her loudly in front of the attending nurses and 2 residents that she was catastrophizing a simple presentation, and that maybe she should let the doctors do the diagnosing. He ordered the patient moved to a standard bay and walked away. Maya stood very still for 3 seconds. Then she followed the patient, performed her own assessment. And when the woman's oxygen saturation began to drop and she started going gray, Maya performed a needle decompression on her own authority. Right there in the bay, with a precise, unhurried motion of someone who had done it a dozen times in far less sterile conditions. The patient stabilized instantly. When Cole came back and saw what had happened, his face went through several colors before settling on a dark, dangerous red. "You performed an invasive procedure without physician authorization," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. "That is a terminable offense. I want a written incident report on my desk in an hour." Maya looked at him steadily. "The patient is alive," she said, and she went back to her station. Nobody remembered afterward exactly what time the black SUV pulled up to the ambulance bay. It was somewhere between the shift change chaos and the arrival of a 5-car pileup from the interstate, when the ER was running at maximum capacity and every nurse and physician was moving at speed. What people remembered was the sound. 3 men coming through the automatic doors, not like patients, not like family members, but like something else entirely. They were moving wrong, too fast, too low, eyes sweeping the room in a pattern that Maya recognized before she had consciously processed what she was seeing. Her body reacted first. Her hands went flat on the triage desk. Her breathing slowed. Something inside her that had been sleeping for 3 years came fully, quietly awake. The men were armed. The leader, heavy-set, tattoos crawling up both sides of his neck. A gun barely concealed under his jacket, scanned the room, and then announced loudly enough for the whole floor to hear that nobody was leaving and nobody was calling anyone, and that they were there for a specific patient who had been brought in 40 minutes ago with a gunshot wound. A man who owed debts to people who did not forgive debts. Behind the nurse's station, someone pressed the silent alarm. A nurse named Diane started crying quietly. 2 of the residents flattened themselves against the wall. Dear Cole, standing 20 FT away near the physician workroom, went completely still and looked for the first time since Maya had met him, like a man with no idea what to do. Maya did not freeze. She did not cry. She catalogued the room in under 4 seconds, with a completeness that would have startled anyone watching closely enough to notice. 3 hostiles, 2 visible firearms, 1 likely concealed on the 3rd man's ankle, 11 staff members in the immediate area, 6 patients in beds, 2 exits blocked, 1 accessible through the supply corridor if she moved fast enough and created the right distraction. She kept her hands visible, her face neutral, and she began to move in slow, deliberate steps toward the center of the room, speaking in the low, even voice she had used to de-escalate armed combatants in villages where the wrong word could end everything. "Hey," she said, "I hear you. Nobody's going anywhere. Let me get you what you need." The leader turned to her with the particular contempt that men like him reserved for women who spoke when not spoken to. "Sit down, little girl," he said. "This doesn't concern you." Maya held his gaze. She said nothing. She just looked at him with those flat, calm eyes, and something in his posture shifted. A fraction of uncertainty he probably couldn't name. He was used to people flinching. She wasn't flinching. He took a step toward her, and that was when the 2nd man moved toward the patient bay where the gunshot victim was being treated, pulling his weapon fully into view, and everything accelerated. What happened in the next 90 seconds would be reconstructed later from security footage and witness accounts, and none of them would fully capture it. Maya moved with a controlled, devastating efficiency that left no room for hesitation or error. She used the crash cart as a first lever point, the 4-pole as a second, and her own hands and body in ways that were not in any nursing school curriculum. The 1st man went down hard against the triage desk, weapon secured before he had finished falling. The 2nd, moving toward the patient bay, found his wrist locked in a joint control that dropped him to his knees with a sound he would feel for months. The 3rd went for the exit and made it approximately 4 steps before Maya's voice stopped him. Not a shout, not a command, but something lower and older that cut right through the noise of the room and landed in his spine like cold water. He stopped. He turned. He saw her face. He put the gun on the floor. The whole floor was silent except for the beeping of monitors and Diane crying harder than before, though for different reasons now. Cole stood against the wall, one hand pressed flat to his chest, staring at Maya Reyes, this rookie nurse he had tried to terminate 40 minutes ago for saving a patient's life. As she zip-tied the third man's wrists with a trauma kit restraint and spoke into the radio she had pulled from the first man's jacket, relaying the situation to the police dispatcher outside with a terminology and cadence that made every person in the room go very still and listen. When the police arrived 6 minutes later, guns drawn expecting chaos, they found 3 subdued men, 11 staff members shaken but unharmed. Every patient still in their bed, and Maya Reyes standing at the triage desk finishing a patient intake form like she was waiting for someone to tell her what came next. The lead officer, a 20-year veteran, walked straight to her and said, "Who the hell are you?" And she handed him the radio and said, "Charge nurse. 4th week." Behind her, Dr. Harrison Cole sat in a chair that someone had pulled out for him, looking at the floor, looking at his hands, looking at nothing in particular. And for the first time in as long as any of his staff could remember, he had absolutely nothing to say. 2 days later, the Navy liaison officer who arrived to speak with hospital administration brought a file that nobody in the building had clearance to read in full. He met briefly with the chief of medicine, said several things quietly that made the chief go pale, and then left. That afternoon, Maya was called into the chief's office and offered the position of emergency department clinical lead, a role that normally went to someone with 10 years of seniority. Cole, standing in the doorway, said nothing. Maya looked at the offer letter for a long moment. Then she looked up and said, "I'll take it, but I want new triage protocols. The current ones are getting people killed." Nobody argued. She went back to her station. She picked up the next chart. She did her job. If this story gave you chills and kept you on the edge of your seat, you are exactly who this channel was made for. Nurse Sentinel exists to tell the stories of extraordinary women who are written off, overlooked, and underestimated until the moment the world has no choice but to see them. Every single week we bring you a new story of courage, hidden strength, and the kind of quiet heroism that never gets the headline it deserves. If that moves you, hit that subscribe button right now and ring the bell so you never miss a chapter, because the next nurse we're telling you about, her story is even bigger. You don't want to walk into that one late.